Welcome back to the channel, Bridging the Gap Student to Engineer, where STEM professionals provide advice to students. Today's video was a request. It's a deep dive into the Ohio State University. We are focusing just on their engineering school today, but also providing you links with the reports that we're reviewing. So please go check out those reports if you want to dig deeper or look into a specific major. And as you're listening to this, if there's someone or an online channel that you think would benefit from this review, please share with them. Also like and subscribe and leave a comment with anything interesting that you hear on the video or see in the data. The Ohio State University makes its data available on a website via a dynamic dashboard that we'll go through. The data and the page is called Postgraduate Outcomes. You'll see on here that it talks about engineering and architecture. I have filtered out the architecture majors, but that information is available on here if that's something that you want to look into. So we'll just scroll down to the dashboard and poke around, talk about some things, and let me know if you have any questions when you get to the end of this. But in the meantime, absolutely share this with friends, family, or others that you think would get some use out of it. So if we just look at, start from the top, so we've got, I've filtered out for just bachelor's degree levels. If you want to look at more, then definitely come follow the link and you can change that here over on the side on the filters. And then I'm also just looking at basically COVID time to the class of 24, which is how recent this data is. The date of the data is typical for the delay in schools reporting this. The reason that I left several years here is just so that we can see a pattern over the years. In general, if we look at schools and their 2020 numbers, the student outcomes are not great. It was right when COVID was starting and a lot of companies had uncertainty. So they had, if you look at this red band, that is the seeking employment percent, and they had 26% in 2020. That has steadily decreased to what they see in their class of 2024, which is 17% seeking employment. So we'll just describe what each of these are. So the gray band, not only in this top section, but in the middle section, the gray band is the percent employed, and then we've got a purplish color, the percent that are furthering their education. Then there's typically a pretty small band here that's like a bluish greenish for people who have other plans. And then the seeking employment is what we're really zeroing in on to look at those who went through their four-year education and within 6 months of graduation were not able to find a job and are still looking for a job. And then they've got a little bit of an orange yellowish color with no info. So for the most part, they've gotten info from a lot of their grads, so that's good because then we can just say it represents the typical graduate for the class that we're looking at. So after that explanation, if we just go to this class of 2024 data, what we are seeing is that 17% are seeking employment. That is a positive outcome rate of about 83%. Now you can say that goes up and down because there's some no info section, but 83% of engineering grads from the Ohio State University not being able to find employment within 6 months of graduation is not a good number. It is encouraging to see that that is improving over the years, but the class of 2025, I would expect to either stay the same or go down just because changes in the economy in that time. So if you look at that, you're purchasing a very expensive service, and the likelihood that you will get to the end and not be able to find a job right away is 17%. To me, that's not great. It is better than some schools we've seen, but definitely not something that makes me feel like I've got to go recommend the Ohio State University. Just as a next step, I filtered for the outcomes for the 23-24 grads. And as you can see, when you look at this next section down under areas of study, the outcomes with different majors vary significantly. This is pretty typical on schools. And some of these results really follow what we're seeing across all schools, and some of them are a little bit more unique. So if you are looking at a specific major, it's definitely worth looking at what your specific major is that you're looking at and seeing what that is. Just quickly looking across here, aero and aviation, following industry, have higher percents of students that are still looking for employment. Biomedical engineering has quite a high percent of students that are going to grad school. So if that's something that you're interested in doing and wanting to go get a job right away, just consider that as something before you go in or as you're continuing to go in. And as I'm going through these, what I'm going to do is pull up the area of study menu so you can see what all these acronyms mean, and we can get a little bit more into what we're seeing here. So chemical and civil do have smaller unemployment numbers, as well as electrical and computer engineering, environmental, industrial and systems engineering. And if we were to look back at over the last 5 years of data that we were looking earlier, industrial and systems is actually the best major as far as student outcomes. So that's an interesting one. I will just say that that is a major that can go into a lot of different industries, as is pretty common among engineering majors. But let's just go to the end here, welding. So welding is an interesting one because it's not a major that you see everywhere. It is typically, well, it is a specialty. There are often a lot of companies looking for welding engineers, but you can see here the results are saying that this past year's worth of data, 22% of the grads are still looking for employment, so still not great outcomes for that major. So let's just go through the hiring companies and then also where the grads end up. So chances are, if you're watching this video, you've heard of the Ohio State University, whether that's through sports or academics or you're working with someone. It is an extremely large university, and as far as a name, there's lots of name recognition. Whether or not the engineering school is well known, or is that it is well known for engineering, is something that we can talk about. But even if we look at this map for 1 year's worth of data, they've got grads spreading all over the US, and a lot in the upper Midwest. So if you're in the upper Midwest and considering Ohio State, you're definitely going to get that name recognition and be working with people who probably graduated from there. And then as we head east or west, excuse me, Texas, California, and Washington are the 3 states where we typically see a lot of grads going. They've got a lot going to Texas and California in this 1 year. In past data, they had more going to Washington, but in this year's worth of data, not too many. But if we look at the hiring companies, it's interesting to me what we're seeing here, because Honda's the biggest, so Honda vehicles, and that's pretty typical for engineering. But the next company is JP Morgan Chase, and when we look at the data for the last 5 years, they actually hired significantly more than any other company. So that's not an engineering company, that's a financial services company, but it is somewhat common for engineering grads to go into the financial services sector. Some people graduate and decide that maybe they don't want to do engineering, or they want to get into something else. I have read some interviews with CEOs of financial services companies saying that they are looking more at getting grads from other majors besides their traditional business majors. So they want a more well-rounded um, group of people working for them, and so it makes sense to include engineers in there. So something to consider when you're looking at the Ohio State University. If we look at the next companies, we've got a lot in defensive and space. So the U.S. Air Force, Boeing, GE Aerospace, Navy, Battelle, all kind of around that defense area. So a lot of grads going into defense in one way or another. And then we've got Intel, computers, Procter and Gamble, consumer products, PepsiCo, also consumer products or food, which makes sense when you've got the food, agriculture, and biological engineering major here. So a good variety of companies hiring from the Ohio State University. I really do like seeing companies hiring a significant quantities of grads from one school, which may indicate some things about their career center. We will look at the graduate survey in a minute that will tell us a little bit more about using the career center versus finding your own job. But it is nice to see companies hiring a lot of grads. So another thing that I want to look at from the Ohio State University is what they're calling their graduation survey. This is for the class of 23-24. And there's a few interesting things on here that I'd like to point out. I'm just going to scroll down so you can see where we've ended up. This report, and I'll provide a link so you can definitely look at it in more detail if you're interested, like everything else. But there's a few things I want to point out that I think are interesting and worth noting. The percent of students who plan to live in Ohio after graduation. This is a little bit low for state school. So if you are looking at going to Ohio State and you're from out of state, or you are from Ohio and you want to escape, don't feel like going to Ohio State is just going to keep you in the state. Okay, so yeah, these numbers about what your best describes your primary postgraduate plans kind of reflects what we've been seeing in the employment outcomes data that we looked at. 29% had accepted an employment position. That's really low. Even if you just say, 22% are going to grad school, that's still only like 50% of students knowing what they're doing. I know there's some other smaller percents in here, but a large percent, 19%, still looking for employment offers. A much smaller percent having offers or have declined them and still searching. So not great numbers, but again, this is not just engineering. This is all majors. So one thing I like to look at, it's available, is how did students find their job? The reason I like to look at this is because if your school has a really strong career center, really strong career fairs, a strong ties to employers who are recruiting heavily, then the percent of students who made contact on their own has got to be pretty small. But in this case, the highest percent, or the largest bar that we see here, is graduates who got their first job by reaching out themselves. And if you add on the students that just went to the company's website and found the job and just applied, that's almost 50%. And to me, that's like not a whole lot. I mean, that's not good. I really would like to see a whole bunch more getting an offer from their internship, or getting an offer from their career fair or the career services center. The fact that the career services center is so extremely low is just concerning to me. I will say that Ohio State is a extremely large school. When you get into a large school like that, your your level of personal service is very different from if you're at a small private school. It's not that the school doesn't offer those services, it's just that the students who are using it may be smaller. But just something to be aware of, that a number of the graduates from Ohio State University are still looking for work. And of those who did get work, a high percent of them got that work on their own, not that the school helped them necessarily get that. But another thing that I really like to look at is the percent of students that have work-related experience. So this is an internship, co-op. Some smaller private schools really pride themselves in making sure that every single graduate has some sort of work experience when they graduate, which is great. If you look at the data and it looks like Ohio State doesn't have that available, but the schools that have that available will show you that if you have an internship, at least one, some sort of work-related experience, that your likelihood of getting a job when you graduate is significantly higher. If you haven't watched it already, we have a video, or actually a series of videos on internships, and I will provide some links in the top here so that you can go look at those. We've got videos on how to get an internship, whether or not you should get an internship, the benefits, those types of things, what an internship is versus a co-op. So there's a number of different topics there. But 67% of students having any work-related experience when they graduate is a little bit low. Again, this is not just engineering, not just STEM, so we don't know what the influence is of other majors here. But I would say if you go to Ohio State, make sure you seek out those internships, co-ops, practicums, apprenticeships, and other academic major-related work experience. Just make sure you get it. So immediately after that, they're asking a very pertinent question. If you had accepted a job offer, how likely is that related to your experience that you had? And it's pretty high. So for those students that had some sort of work experience, more than half of them got their full-time job through that work experience. A huge bonus to having that experience. So a good indication right here without seeing other data. And then the number of work-related experiences that students have. So it's pretty decent. I would like to see a little bit higher. One thing about having students having 4 work-related experiences is that if you complete your degree in 4 years, you have 3 summers. So if you have 4 or more, either you're getting that experience during the school year, separate from the summers, or it's taking you more than 4 years to graduate. So they've got 10% there, just something to note. And then they go through more questions. When did you get your first work-related experience? So I'll just repeat again, this is not just engineering, but the first year, after the first year, 13% had that first experience, but it's more common for students to get internships after their second or third year. So just something to be aware of. Strongly recommend getting an internship, but if you can't get one after your freshman year, it's not the end of the world. Just try again next year, and consider using your summer to take a class and get ahead, or get another job. There is a question here about at least one of your internships paid. The industry really encourages now interns being paid. And so if you are being offered an unpaid internship, especially in engineering, I would keep looking around. I am not aware of any unpaid internships in STEM right now. So just be aware that you should get paid. The days of free internships are winding down. So don't accept that if you can help it. That is all the data we're going to look at today for The Ohio State University. If you have any questions or comments or thoughts about the data that we've reviewed, please let us know and we will get back to you. Otherwise, we'll see you on the next one.